Dragons. A creature of legend or a real-life thing? Hi, I'm Metagross Freak, and today I'm going to be doing a video on the most popular creature in mythology, the dragon. Just by Google searching the word dragons, or heck, even just dragon, you get almost a billion results. 819 million results. So, is a dragon real? Is it fake? Well, we can look at the Pokémon franchise, and we can know that dragons are a popular subject. In fact, there are more dragons than ghost types, and ghost types are pretty cool as well. But I'm not going to get into ghosts there. So to show the versatility, I guess, of the dragon, I'm going to be placing many of the dragons, or at least the final forms of many dragons, on a map to show you how widespread this legend is. First, I want to start out with a personal favorite of mine. I know it's technically not a dragon, but with Sceptile. Now, Sceptile is in the Dragon Egg group in Pokemon, and it can learn Dragon Tail and Dragon Claw, and I believe possibly even Dragon Pulse. Now, Sceptile is a really awesome Pokemon, and if you look at it, you can kind of see some dragon-like features. However, it's based on a dinosaur that's found in North America. So, let me plop it right there, and let's continue on. The next one is going to be, of course, the first Pokemon that was technically a dragon, but was never actually dragon type, and that's Charizard. And Charizard has its basis, obviously, in a European dragon. In fact, most of these dragons that Pokemon bases them are actually European dragons, including all three legendaries from Unova. In fact, I'm not even going to include all three of them just because there's so many. So I'm just going to have Kyurem Black to represent all three dragons from Gen 5. Now you can argue that Kyurem is actually represents Yin Yang and Wuji, which is true. However, if you look at it, it's obviously a European dragon. So I'm just going to plop it up there. I should probably get rid of these as I go along. Let me make a little folder that I can start, well, not trashing them, but I can start sorting them into ones I've already done. Alright. Charizard, Sceptile, Kyurem. Okay. Okay, next comes Drudgeon. There we go. Now, Drudgeon's a cool Pokemon, and you can see it also relates to a European dragon, but it also has many, because of its ability Rough Skin and because of its kind of crazy monstery look, it has many similarities with gargoyles, which are basically a European thing. So let's shrink them down and toss them in Europe. For the sake of, well, not comic relief, but for the sake of this, gargoyles are probably most well known for their appearance in Notre Dame, and so I'm going to put it over in the France area. Alright, next, again, not a dragon, but it should be Tyranitar. Tyranitar is one of the most popular Pokemon in the series, and it resembles a dragon. However, more specifically, it's based on the popular monster Godzilla, which is, of course, a Japanese kaiju. So let's plop it down in Japan and continue on. Next we have Gyarados, and I know it's again not really a dragon. Do I have her here? Oh, there we go. Milotic. Now both of these are based on sea serpents. However, both of these are based on sea serpents, and so we can put them in the ocean, obviously. However, because they both, but Milotic, however, is less of a dragon. She's in the Dragon Egg group, though. But I'll just put Gyarados in. Now, Gyarados has also is said to be based on the Loch Ness Monster. So because we're not really sure, because no one can be truly sure, I'll plop it down here in the Atlantic Ocean. Next up we have Kingdra. Now Kingdra actually is part dragon, and some people are saying, well, some people say no, Horsea and Seadra, they weren't they weren't dragons. They were obviously seahorses. Well, a relative of the seahorse is the sea dragon, which is what Kingdra is based after. The sea dragon, similar to the seahorse, is a small sea creature native to the Pacific Ocean, more specifically on the California side. In fact, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, one of the most popular attractions in Monterey, has a whole exhibit just on seahorses and sea dragons. Next up, I'll do one of the most popular dragons, Giratina. Now, I was trying to get Giratina in its origin form. I don't actually like the altered form. However, both its original and altered form have similarities to the basilisk, as well as to the amphitheater, which is a dragon that's very serpentine with no limbs. Which is again a type of European dragon. As you can see, Europe is already starting to crowd up, even though we've barely gotten started. Dialga, personally one of my favorite dragons. However, it's obviously based on a dinosaur. In fact, it's based on a sauropod, such as the Brachiosaurus and the Dilophosaurus, which is actually a dinosaur that lives in North America, or that lived in North America. Next we have, I know, again, it's not a dragon, but it has basis in it, is Steelix. Steelix and Onyx are both based on creatures called worms, spelled W-Y-R-M, which was a European dragon that was worm-like, and if it had limbs, were very short, and it basically was more kind of like a constrictor snake. It would dig through the ground, and occasionally would pop up and steal goats and children. So I'm going to just toss Steelix in with the rest of the European dragons. Next up we have Flygon. Now Flygon isn't in the dragon type egg group, but he actually is a dragon. Now Flygon is actually Vibrava is actually based on a dragonfly, and Flygon is named after has fly and gon from dragon in its name. So it's obvious that it's based on dragonflies, which are native to North America. Whoa! Excellent, moved our map there. Next up we have Salamence, again a European dragon. In fact, after a couple minutes, I'm actually going to stop just putting European dragons on there. Next we have Garchomp. Now Garchomp is actually an interesting Pokemon. Garchomp is actually a reference to the Land Shark skit by Saturday Night Live, which is of course based in New York. In addition, it has elements relating to European dragons, and it also resembles a hammerhead shark. Hammerhead sharks, of course, being found in the Atlantic Ocean, which is the side of the world that New York is on. So, with that, let's shrink Garchomp down and toss him in the ocean, shall we? Okay, next up, the first official dragon type, Dragonite. Now, Dragonite, although you can say has very many similarities to European dragons, its previous forms, Dratini and Dragonair, were based more on sea serpents and Chinese luck dragons. In fact, Dragonite is referred to as the Guardian of the Sea in earlier games, and the Guardian of the Sea was a Chinese dragon. So, because all three of its members are related to Chinese dragons, we'll plop it down in China. Similarly, Altaria, another dragon who looks more like a bird really than a dragon, is based on a Chinese legend of a bird with dragon-like features, or actually, well, a dragon with bird-like features. Next we have Haxorus, again, one of the most popular Pokemon in Gen 5, and for obvious reasons. Although it does have although it looks more like a dinosaur than a dragon, Haxorus it actually is a dinosaur. In fact, Haxorus is based actually more on a sauropod. Probably the best known sauropod is the Triceratops, which I know it does not resemble a Triceratops at all. In fact, a Bastiodon or Schildion better represent it, but Haxorus is related to that family, and a lot of the species in that family were again found up in Europe. Were again found in North America. All right. Next we have, of course, to go with Dialga, who we'd sent back in the beginning of the video, Palkia, who's again based on a European dragon, and however, because of its water typing, we can say it also has sea dragon roots. So we'll put it over in North America. I'll put it over on Iceland, just so it's closer to Dialga, and it also being some kind of maritime area. Okay. Next we have Hydreigon. Hydreigon is the Uber of is another Uber from Gen 5, and it has its basis in the Hydra as well as the Yamato no Orochi, a legend from Japan. Now, because we have way too many dragons over in the Europe region, I'm going to go with the Yamato no Orochi, even though it has Hydra in its name. So let's move Tyranitar over and give him a new friend. In addition, in fact, I'm going to move him up. Hydreigon actually also resembles a monster from the Slavic, from Slavic legends. So I'm going to put it up a little bit more near Russia. And last but not least, the last dragon we have here is Rayquaza. Now, Rayquaza has many similarities to Chinese dragons. However, we have three parts of the world that aren't covered: South America, Africa, and Australia. Now it's kind of hard to find It's kind of hard to find many legends in Australia unless you're looking in the Maori, unless you're looking into Maori legends. However, one thing that Rayquaza does have is it shares many similarities with the ancient god of Quetzalcoatl, who was said to be a feathered serpent, who was a god. Who was a god. Now, Rayquaza is a legendary Pokemon with godlike powers to be able to control all weather. And he's able to stop the weather with his ability Airlock. And if you look at him, he actually is a serpent, and he has these kind of like frills on him. So you can say that he has base in South America. So let's take a look at what we have here. As you can see, we have a lot of Pokemon with basis in Europe. We have quite a few Pokemon, and we have quite a few dragons with basis in far eastern Asia, and a lot of Pokemon with basis in North America. In fact, hammerhead sharks, which are the physical basis of Garchomp, can only be found are found more commonly in the Gulf of Mexico. And if you take the whole fact that we have no real idea where Gyarados came from, we can assume that he's probably just some kind of sea serpent, considering that when map makers would make maps, in areas that they hadn't explored, they would write, "Here there be dragons." And because Gyarados is obviously a sea monster, we can assume it's an ocean dragon. But if we look here, we can obviously see a nice little swoopy pattern that basically everything above the equator is covered in dragons. So, what do these dragons have in common? Besides being Pokemon, we can all see that they have a similar body style, with like these wings or kind of like these frills. They have a monstrous appearance. It's obvious that these, even though many of these are based more on dinosaurs, we can see that this is, in many ways, also based, around one simple thing. Now, if we take out all the guys who aren't actually based on dragons, in fact, I'm not even going to keep Flygon. Even though Flygon looks like a dragon, he's based more on a dragonfly, so he's gone too. Sorry, Garchomp. Now, the idea with Quetzalcoatl, he was described as a feathered serpent, which for me, that describes a dragon. Okay, and there we go. Oh, yeah. So here we go. We have a dragon that could be European or could be Japanese. We have we have a dragon that is based on China again and Europe. We have a feathered serpent, and interestingly enough, Quetzalcoatl, when the European settlers settled in the Central America, South America, they thought that the European settlers were gods because their skin was so pale and their hair was lighter. It was lighter, like a tan and blonde and red, as opposed to the dark browns and the dark brown and the black that the natives had. So because they confused the Europeans for their gods, we can assume that that Rayquaza also has his basis in Europe. And if you actually move all these guys in, assuming that you can, Godzilla also has its basis in Europe. The Hydra again in Europe, even though it also has many similarities with the Yamato no Orochi. And of course, even though it's based on a luck dragon, Dragonite actually has its influence physically on the European dragon. So if you see it, we have an entire cluster of dragons coming from Europe. What's that mean? Well, it just means that Pokemon is really good at taking mythology from across the world and turning it into something we can enjoy. What else have we learned? That Europe is freaking crazy about dragons. So, I don't know what that tells us of whether dragons are real or not. However, the Europeans had something about dragons that they thought was real. Now, if we look up dragon again, we can visit our we have tons of votes just by taking the S off again. We have about 5 times as many votes. I say vote, not votes. Results. If you look at dragon in Wikipedia, dragons are found. The European dragon. We have Chinese dragons and even Greek dragon. In fact, sorry, the English word dragon comes from drakon, which is Greek for serpent of huge size, dragon, or water snake. Dragons are worldwide creatures and are really cool. But if we look at if we look at dragons, most of them are based on serpentine legendary creatures. We have the wyvern, and we have a lot of it mentions Welsh folklore. We have a lot of dragons in legends. More importantly, like Saint George and the Dragon, and even Beowulf. He fights a worm, which is a dragon. So I'm Metagross Freak, and you just learned a little bit more about dragons. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to hearing from you. Peace out.